Thank you for hanging in there with us, Mr. Tigert. And I will submit my questions for the record for our two athletes that were here with us, because I do think that there is some really important conversation to be had about the mental health that these cases and these situations are putting on our athletes. And I do agree with your assessment that many nations treat this as a geopolitical tool. They use their athletes effectively as foot soldiers to further their mission. So I agree that this is really important. I want to kind of dig into some of the nitty gritty. While you were speaking, we were talking a lot. We kept hearing about the zero tolerance policy. I just pulled up the IOC's website, and they say right there, point blank, we have a zero tolerance policy. What does that mean, especially in light of these 23 Chinese athletes that have popped positive on their drug test?
I think it's good PR. Honestly, I think, and that's what's so crushing about the Russia issue and this now China issue. We have to stop the charade. If we're gonna fight to win, just like these two athletes give everything to be champions, those of us who are here to protect fairness in sport and the integrity of sport, particularly the Olympic movement, it's different, arguably, than pro sport. Right. We have to win this battle, not just attempt to give the appearance that we're for zero tolerance, for example, or a lot of testing, for example. Right. We actually have to go out and try to win this for athletes.
So what is the relationship then between WADA and the International Testing Agency? They put out a very flowery press release talking about how they're ready for Paris. What exactly is that relationship? How do the two collaborate?
Yeah, so WADA, has an observer board seat on the International Testing Agency, but they also oversee them and the sports that the International Testing Agency runs. The IOC created and funds and has governing positions on the International Testing Agency. That said, they are definitely an improvement from what was there before, and they will be involved, hopefully in partnership with us, when the games come to LA 2028. And we hope to work effectively with them. WADA does not test. And it's sometimes a misnomer. They oversee the groups that test. Right. The International Testing Agency, along with USADA, CHINADA in China, USADA in Russia, WADA oversees us. WADA has to make sure we comply with the rules.
And the people who are testing, they're called the doping control officers?
That's right.
Correct? So what is the nationality of these DCOs that come and test these athletes on a regular basis?
They can be from all over.
Is it more national? Are American DCOs testing American athletes, or is it kind of a hodgepodge? I'm trying to get a better sense of what it looks like.
Yeah, so we have employees that are doping control officers who, as you've heard, sometimes go into athletes' house at 6 o'clock in the morning and collect samples. The International Testing Agency will sometimes they'll use us to do their testing when they test here in the United States. When Michael Phelps talked about he was tested and then 2 hours later he was tested again, that was the World Aquatics, I suspect, that came in and tested him afterward, and that was unbeknownst to us because they sent a third party in to do that kind of testing. And this is a really important point because while WADA has put out a lot of testing numbers by China, those, as we understand it, and we've investigated this, are all through the Chinese National Anti-Doping Agency. They don't have third parties that come in and do the testing. They're solely relying, as we understand it, on the Chinese Anti-Doping Agency, and they're only using the Chinese laboratory. We're here in the United States, one, we have 2 labs. 2, we allow foreign testers to come in and test in the US if it's not a test that we're performing.
Well, and shouldn't that be a redundancy that the IOC adopts as just good standard practice?
It's a good check. It's a good check and balance.
So, I mean, the vetting, is there any vetting of or standards that are established by WADA for the DOCs that
There is a international standard for testing and investigations that all doping control officers have to go through, and it's a full background check. Here in the U.S., all of ours are Safe Sport certified, which is not the case around the world, unfortunately. Something that we're obviously very proud of, given the crisis and saga there and the victims that were deeply affected. Ours are employees, so we background checks, all of the things that you would do to ensure that the folks that are going in to test are actually trustworthy and can do the job at the level that they need to do the job.
Is there a follow-up standard, though? So it's kind of like you pass the background check and then, you're off to the races, no pun intended. But is there continual follow-up of, are these people compromised? Because, I mean, this is, at the highest levels. Is there any follow-up with these DCOs along the way?
Yeah, for sure. For at least here in the United States, I couldn't speak to what happens necessarily around the world, but there's evaluation, constant athlete feedback, correction if there's, minor conformities that need to be dealt with, but constant oversight to make sure we've got the best people in the trenches doing that kind of work, because that's the first leg of the testing process. If you have bad collections, if you give advance notice, then it's only as good as, ultimately what you're going to collect, which athletes can find ways to defeat the system if they're given that advance notice.
I'm getting the signal that my time has expired. I have some remaining questions that I will submit for the record. Thank you for your time and for appearing before the committee today. We appreciate it. I yield.